This is Troy Black, and y'all are watching Filibusted. And I believe that President Trump may be about to attack Iran. Why is that? Well, I think it has a lot to do with something that Iran is hiding and has been hiding for a while. And some of that information just came out today. So I'm going to show you that why I believe he may be about to attack, but also, and I know there's a lot of different pressures mounting, but this is a very specific thing that's taking place. But also, I believe that there's a game of who's lying that's taking place right now. The U.S. and Trump accusing Iran of certain things, Iran accusing the U.S. of lying and back and forth. And I also want to talk about how do we discern the truth? How do we know especially when you have to rely on, investigative journalism coming out of a country and there's only like one source? Do you know if that was true or not? How can we tell the difference, right? I'm going to get into that as well. So this is where I want to start. Iran accuses U.S. of spreading big lies after Trump's State of the Union address. So in this article, we see that Trump recently increased the military presence in the Middle East. That's fairly obvious. I mean, it started back June of 2024. Many people remember the Iran nuclear facilities attack. And for a heartbeat, it felt like we're about to start World War III. And then things kind of died down a little bit, and everybody breathed a sigh of relief, right? Seemed like a pretty good call at the time. Trump spoke of the protests during his State of the Union address. And this is what he said. They've killed at least 32,000 protesters in their own country. Now, that report has not been verified completely across the board, but there have been many journalists inside of the nation of Iran and that are connected to people in Iran that have shared very similar numbers. So it feels very likely at this point. He said they shot a lot of them and hung them, and referring to the regime as terrible people. Okay, pretty obvious to see that. I mean, what's happening in Iran? The people that 90% of their water is gone. There's a water crisis. There's a food crisis. There's an energy crisis. They took away their access to the internet and like all these different things, right? And even the merchants, group in Iran that for a long time supported the regime, they've now turned their backs on the regime. There's a lot of infighting taking place, and obviously these protests where people are literally just trying to shut the government down. But Iranian officials have rejected most of the recent figures put forward by Trump, obviously. But who's lying, right? Is it Trump? Is it Iran? And that's what we're going to talk about. Recently, a spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry also claimed that the U.S. is spreading disinformation and misinformation against them. So you see that. But this is interesting. This is a CNN article. Obviously, I don't have access to the full article because I'm not subscribed, but you can read the headline. Iranian regime pressures families of slain protesters to bury truth of crackdown. This was from earlier today. And this is a very leftist, CNN like news site that's reporting this. So if it's being reported on both sides, likelihood of it being true is much higher, right? Because sometimes the left will push the truth. Sometimes the right will push the truth to try to get a certain narrative out front. But this, to me, is pretty clear that what is happening in Iran is just unspeakably terrible, right? So what is Iran's history of telling the truth? Can we trust Iran, right? I mean, it's a pretty obvious answer, but let's just walk through this. The IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they're kind of like a authoritative, impartial third party in the investigation. They report that though Iran constantly denied pursuing nuclear weapons, they maintained a structured nuclear weapons program until 2003, with some activities actually continuing all the way up till 2009. And more recently, this has been known for a while, but more recently we've seen even more stuff come out that we weren't aware of before. And actually in a 2005 speech, and here's the Arms Controls Association where you can go look at all this information. There's many different places where this is publicly available and verified, right? And so the point is they were lying about it the whole time, right? So they've been untrustworthy for the last 47 years, right? Well, here's a speech from Hassan Rouhani, I think is how you pronounce his name. He was then Iran's nuclear negotiator head and later president. He admitted out loud in his 2005 speech that they were conducting secret nuclear tests of a certain kind. And this is literally the actual speech written out. If you want to go read it, it's available online. So they're saying, no, we're not publicly. No, we're not. And then, yeah, we were type of thing. So a 2018 raid, which is a lot later on Tehran, a warehouse there, actually brought forth 100,000 files showing and proving that Iran had been lying about never seeking nuclear weapons. Again, the whole time, right? That's a lot later date. There's also declassified U.S. documents that highlight Iran's lack of transparency all the way back to 1979. And those have been confirmed in many cases by the IAEA as well. Again, a third party. So here's another thing that just came out. The IAEA flags Iran's 60% uranium reserve. Why the revelation matters. So this is what I want. Why do I think the chances and the likelihood of Trump striking Iran has just gone through the roof again? Well, it's because this is the same location that Trump decided to strike last year. But what we're seeing now is that the actual uranium reserves in this tunnel complex, in this Isfahan nuclear facility, are still intact. So the hits, the strikes from last year did some damage, but didn't necessarily take out the nuclear material that we were trying to take out. So this was last year that they targeted this, and it appears it's undamaged, right? At least, and so like the entrances were hit, but it's underground, I believe, and the complex is it's very complex. Well, there we go. The complex is complex. Yeah, very creative word. This site houses uranium enriched up to 60%. The thresholds for nuclear weapons typically is 90%, but based on some of the limited research I've done, and we've done a lot of different videos on Iran, and I'll post a link to the playlist if you want to watch some more of those. But some of the research I've done, you can still create very destructive weapons with uranium that's been enriched less than 90% pure, but they're just not going to be as good. But it's still possible. And according to experts in this field, you can rapidly convert it from 60% to 90%. So it doesn't take a lot more work to get it to where it needs to be to create extremely destructive nuclear weapons. And that's what they've got available to them, right? So history of lying publicly about nuclear experiments and tests and all that kind of stuff. And now this thing that we thought we took out has not been taken out. Pretty bad, right? Pretty bad situation. Some technical discussions between the U.S. and Iran are supposed to start in Vienna next week. But yeah, I mean, how do you believe them at this point, right? Because they keep lying. Of course, they're going to keep lying. They still insist that they're all meant to be for civilian purposes. So here is a little bit of a wait, though. It's like, okay, what if you do strike this nation? And what if you're wrong, right? What if you're wrong about the protesters? What if the protesters are not being killed? What if they really were just trying to develop their nuclear energy capacity for civilian purposes? What if all that? And I don't think that's true, right? But I'm just saying, how do you know if you're making the right move or not? As the president, obviously I'm not the president, but as the United States, if you are in a position like that, or how do you know what to support and who is making the right move, right? I want to talk about that after I do a few other things. Okay, here is another bit of information. Iran blocking nuclear watchdog from sites hit by U.S. Israel report. So this is another bit of information that says Iran is still hiding something. They still have something to hide, because even these sites that were hit last year that they say, everything's fine, there's nothing to see here, they're still hiding the information, and they're still not allowing the IAEA to come in and actually observe what's going on. And here's a quote from this article. Observation of the Isfahan facility, some 215 miles southeast of Tehran, showed regular vehicle activity around the entrance to a tunnel complex used to store enriched material. So there's still vehicles coming in and out of this place constantly, is what they're saying. So they're either moving it someplace else, or they're still working in this facility and it's still in working order. That is very concerning to me, right? And obviously, our administration in the government is very aware of all this stuff that's going on. This is an interesting video from Dr. Steve Turley that came out yesterday. Breaking fighter storm, Khamenei's compound, regime in chaos. And so one of the things that he brings forth, and this kind of gives another piece to the puzzle, is essentially what he's saying is there is so much like infighting and so many things happening inside of the country right now with the protests, with the people that he's essentially suggesting a regime change is possible. A coup is inevitable, right? Is what he's saying. And he even claims that Trump was presented with an assassination plan for Khamenei specifically. Some of the things that he describes, he also describes their military, and their elite guards I think they have 8,000 in their capital city being overrun by enemy key fighters, or at least them breaking through, the troops or whatever. So the implication is that their regime is being squeezed from within, not just from external forces. So all of that to say, you can go watch the video for yourself if you want, but all that to say, it could be that we see something happen before the U.S. even has to strike. So there's a possibility, and possibly maybe Trump is waiting for that to happen. Maybe we're kind of twiddling our thumbs and thinking, do we need to, or is something going to break? Not sure, not exactly sure. But could be that a major shift happens without the U.S. needing to strike. All right. Here's the other episodes if you want to go watch what's happening or what we've been reporting on the last year or so. A lot of episodes having to do with Iran. One of the most interesting ones, though, is this one right here. This is why Iran just won't stop. This is from 8 months ago. He won't quit, right? This is it's a shorter clip from a longer, like, exclusive episode we did, but it kind of talks about the reason why this is not just something that someone's going to give up on, be like, okay, right, it's just one of those things where the pressure is going to keep mounting and mounting and mounting until the dam bursts, right? So what is the Christian response? Because this is what I want to talk about now. How do we know who's telling the truth, right? Well, one thing is pretty obvious, right? Iran has a history of not telling the truth. And I am not saying that you can always trust the United States government. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Trump has always told the truth, right? But when you see that somebody's baseline is to lie and to lie and to cover up and to lie, you can trust that they're going to be untrustworthy, right? This is Proverbs 14:5. A trustworthy witness will not lie. So it's describing the type of individual that does not condone lying, that will not settle for a lie, but they want the truth to come out even at their own expense. Now, we don't see that kind of individual very often, especially not in politics, especially not in government affairs, that kind of stuff, right? But a false witness declares lies. So first, we have to make the distinction. Is this person a trustworthy witness, or are they a false witness? And if they're a false witness, if they're deemed a false witness, we can expect them to lie, right? Exactly what's happening with Iran. Here's another verse, though. Proverbs 12:19. Truthful lips will endure forever, but a lying tongue is only for a moment. Okay. Eventually, the lie is going to catch up with you. That's what it's saying. Eventually, when you're staying truthful and you prefer to tell the truth, what's going to happen is you're going to have, if you have consequences, you're going to have to face those up front, which is the best way to face most consequences, right? But the more that you hide it, the more that you cover up, eventually it's going to catch up with you. You can see all the people that are being lined up now to go through the prosecution for the being related to or part of the Epstein story, right? It's like eventually the lies are going to catch up with you. And at some point, you're going to have to pay the piper, for lack of a better phrase. And I believe that's going to happen in this case too, because not only, just like I said earlier, you've got both sides. Here's an article from CNN saying the Iranian regime is pressuring families of slain protesters. So Iran's obviously lying about that, but it's probably actually happening. And it's become so obvious and so clear that people are willing to report on it. Okay, James 1:5. This is my response to somebody who says, okay, but how do I know who's lying in this instance, right? Or how do I know if the person that I'm supporting, how do I know if they're justifying a lie in order to do what they feel like is quote unquote the right thing, right? And how do I know where do I take my stand? James 1:5. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. So if you're not a Christian, this may sound like hocus pocus, ridiculous response, but I found it to be true in my life, in my own life personally. There have been times where I had no idea what to do, and I just prayed and I said, God, I need help, and He showed up. And He gave me wisdom. There was an idea or information or even just a perspective that dropped into my mind. And I was like, okay, now I know what I need to do, right? Or somebody else, or He brought somebody else along that was able to share wisdom that I needed in that moment. God is real. He loves you, and He wants to give you wisdom for your life. And this is where we should go. That when we are faced with that struggle, is this person lying? Are they not lying? right? Or what perspective should I take? We can always have wisdom when we're willing to ask, and God is the one that gives it. So here's one last thought. What happens when we start mimicking or justifying lying because of the weight of the situation, right? Because that's maybe what a politician feels like. Okay, I've got to lie to the public in this case because because the circumstances are so big that it warrants a lie, right? And then we can start to kind of take on that same pattern. Well, I want to remind you of Colossians 3:9-10. It says, "Do not lie to one another, since you stripped off the old self with its evil practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed to a true knowledge according to the image of the one who created it." So God's plan for us and his design for our lives is that we'd walk in the truth, that we'd speak truth one to another, and that we would speak truth in love. And here's the good news is even if we're caught in a lie, or even if we are prone to lie, God has a way out of that temptation. And that way out is through the blood of his son, Jesus. When he died for us, he paid for our sin on the cross so that we could be forgiven when we believe in him, but also so that we could be changed. So you don't have to be a liar. I don't have to be a liar. And yeah, we all still make mistakes, but when we lie, the best response is to just admit it and say, hey, I lied. I messed up. To confess it to God, confess it to those that need to hear it, that need to know, and then walk in the truth. So y'all let me know what you think about Iran. Do you feel like right now is the pressure point when Trump's going to hit, or do you feel like something else is going to snap from within? Where are we? What's happening right now in this next couple weeks? Probably, possibly, very possibly. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.